It was called Hitler's Buzzsaw, a weapon so fast, so deadly, that Soviet soldiers swore it chewed through men like paper. But what history books often skip is the nightmare for the men behind it. The MG34 crew. Frozen, hunted, and always the first to die. This is their story, the brutal reality of manning the deadliest machine gun of the Eastern Front. The year is 1942. The Eastern Front. Temperatures plunge below -30 degrees. A two-man German MG34 crew, gunner and loader, dig into a frozen foxhole outside Zev, the meat grinder of the war. Their gun a steel serpent, waiting to spit death at 900 rounds per minute. The Soviets are coming. Waves of men, charging through snow and smoke. And in that moment every second counts. The MG34 roars to life. The battlefield erupts. Brass casings burn through thin gloves. The barrel overheats. And as the enemy closes in, the crew knows the truth. The gun makes them gods for a moment, but it also paints a giant target on their backs. The MG34 wasn't just a machine gun. It was the first true general-purpose machine gun, introduced by Nazi Germany in 1934. Versatile, elegant, deadly. It could be mounted on bipods, tripods, tanks, even aircraft. Firing the standard 7.92 by 57mm Mauser round, it delivered sustained fire unmatched by anything the Allies had. But that firepower came at a cost, weight maintenance, and the constant need for barrels and belts of ammo. For a two-man crew, the gun wasn't just a weapon. It was a burden. Each man carried not only the gun or spare barrels, but also ammunition belts, tool kits, and water cans to cool the barrels. Fully loaded, the MG34 setup could weigh nearly 60 pounds before you added the icy mud, the snow, or the creeping terror of being overrun. The Eastern Front was a world of extremes, blistering summers, bone-shattering winters, and endless killing fields. MG34 crews were prized assets. Commanders placed them at key points in trenches, forests, or ruined buildings where they could control the battlefield with overlapping arcs of fire. But that came with a brutal reality. If the Soviets wanted to take a position, they went for the machine gunners first. Red Army snipers hunted MG crews relentlessly. Mortar teams zeroed in on their muzzle flashes. And Soviet infantry, knowing the gun was the backbone of German defenses, would charge with grenades, sometimes sacrificing dozens just to silence the weapon. For every German infantry squad, the MG34 wasn't support, it was the squad. The riflemen existed to protect the gun, feed it ammo, and keep it alive as long as possible. The MG34's greatest strength, its rate of fire, was also its greatest weakness. At 900 rounds per minute, the barrel overheated quickly. Crews were trained to fire in short, controlled bursts, but in the chaos of battle, discipline cracked. Gunners fired until the barrel glowed orange, then scrambled to swap out under fire, a process that took seconds but felt like a lifetime. If they failed, the barrel warp jammed or exploded. And a jammed gun in the face of a Soviet charge was a death sentence. Then there was the ammo. Each belt carried 50 rounds, and in sustained combat, an MG34 could chew through thousands in minutes. Runners risked their lives dragging boxes of ammo through artillery barrages, while loaders fed the belt and prayed they wouldn't run dry mid-attack. What history often forgets is the psychological toll. Survivors describe nights where the screams of the wounded never stopped, days where frostbite blackened fingers, and the crushing knowledge that every trigger pull carved minutes off their own survival. Crews rarely lived long. Soviet offensives bled them dry. And replacements came fast, barely trained kids, shoved behind the gun, forced to learn in the chaos of battle. One veteran recalled, "The MG34 was our lifeline and our curse. You couldn't stop firing, because stopping meant dying." Despite its reputation, the MG34 wasn't perfect. It was delicate. Mud, sand, or ice could jam its tight tolerance parts. In Stalingrad's rubble or Kursk's mud, that could be fatal. It was expensive and slow to produce, which is why Germany introduced the MG42 in 1942, simpler, cheaper, and even deadlier. And for all its killing power, the MG34 couldn't stop the tide. By 1944, the Red Army was coming with more men, more tanks, and a will to absorb staggering losses. The gun turned battlefields into slaughterhouses, but couldn't win a war. By the end of the war, the MG34 had carved its place in history. Over 350,000 units were produced, and its design influenced generations of machine guns, from NATO's MG3 to modern general-purpose machine guns used worldwide. But for the men who manned it, there was no glory, no heroic endings, just the memory of smoke, fire, and the endless roar of the gun. Today, when historians call it Hitler's Buzzsaw, it's easy to focus on the weapons myth. But the MG34 was more than a weapon. It was a sentence. For every crew, the Eastern Front was a game of survival measured in seconds, in trigger pulls, in the empty brass casings piling up around their boots. And when the smoke cleared, the battlefield held no heroes. Only the dead, and the men who lived long enough to wish they hadn't.